Mauro Prosperi got lost in the Sahara desert while he was going for a run. You might be wondering, how the heck does that even happen? Because that's what I was wondering. So I'm going to tell you. My name is Jenny Deas, and I'm here at Fate and Fables telling you stories every single Sunday. So if you like survival and you like flowers, you might want to hit subscribe and come hang out with me each Sunday. I would be so glad to have you here. Just chatting it up in the garden, okay? So let's dive into Mauro Prosperi. Who was he? Mauro Prosperi was a 39-year-old ex-police officer and ex-Olympic level pentathlete when he joined the 1994 Marathon des Sables. This is a race that is pretty hardcore. It's not just like going for a little run, which is what I originally thought when I read the headlines of this story. I'm like, why would anyone choose to run through the Sahara, right? My mind, I like green, if you can't tell. The desert just is not something that I would ever think of to go for a run in. And even more so, the heat, like I just can't imagine what these runners went through. That's absolutely bonkers to me. But he decided he wanted to do it, right? So he got all jazzed for it. He started training, and mind you, like he's Olympic level, so he has trained before. So he knew what to do. He actually started practicing dehydrating himself. He was limiting his water levels. He was running every day. His wife, his poor wife, Cinsa, at the time, he even says about her that she was an absolute saint. During all of this, she did not understand why he wanted to do this race, as probably most of us wouldn't, unless maybe you're a big runner and you're like, that would be so cool. They still do this run, so if you're into it, look it up. Maybe you want to go for a run through the desert too. But he decided he wanted to do this, and she was like, oh my gosh, you're insane. And his response to her was a little bit hilarious to me. All he told her, quote, was, the worst I'm going to get is a sunburn, end quote. And I mean, how many of us have been there when we wanted to go do something that a partner or a friend or a family were like, that idea is ridiculous, don't do that. And you're like, it's not gonna be that bad. So that was his mindset for it. He was like, it's gonna be great. There's a bunch of other people doing it. He's very well trained, very fit. And he knew what he was doing, right? So he was not worried. So he shows up to this race in 1994. And he says, nowadays there's like thousands of people that do this race, and it's like a big snake that goes through the desert. It starts in Morocco, which is a beautiful place. I have been there. The people are amazing. The place is amazing. I still wouldn't want to go for a run there. But he did. So there he was. So he shows up, and there's only 80 something people there that were actually there. And then not even all of them were even running. So it ended up, not being that many people way back then in 1994. Nowadays, lots of people are into it. The safety standards are a little bit more high, maybe probably because of this particular event. But so he gets to going anyway, and he says he's having a great time. He's not struggling. He says it's really not that hard, which his mindset, okay, very cool that it's not that hard. Awesome, sir, And so he's cruising along. He says there's other Italians that are also running the race, and basically, like, as you go along, there are checkpoints, and at each checkpoint they refill your water, make sure you're still alive, and then you run off to the next checkpoint. So everything was marked, that kind of thing. And he says that you have like 36 hours to get to each section of the race. Otherwise, I guess you're out or something. So I didn't really look into that part, but you have 36 hours to get to the next point. So it's a multi-day race is what I'm trying to say. I think it was like meant to be like lasted 9 days or something like that. So these guys, they have like sleeping packs, they have tents, they have water, they have, their water gets filled up at each checkpoint thing because you can't carry that much water, right? But they have like dehydrated food. So he's prepared. And basically each night they make it to their little next stop. He puts up his flag on his tent, his Italian flag that he's got with, and all the other Italians that are running in the race can find him, and they all party at their tent. Probably not a real party because they're running, but they like runner party at their tent for the night and hang out. He said it's really fun. Everybody's having a great time together, right? But on day 4, everything changes. So on day 4, they start the race. Everybody's going along. He said it's kind of spaced out. You don't really see any other people. So you just kind of feel like you're running alone, right? Even though you're not that far from everybody else. It just kind of ends up that way with the pacing. So on day 4, all of a sudden, a massive sandstorm hits while he is running. And I mean, if you've never heard or like researched into a sandstorm, it is a big freaking deal. Like it's huge winds. The sand dunes switch around like it's big walls of sand. So he gets hit with this big wall of sand and he says he can't see, he can't breathe. So his mind is like, okay, he doesn't go into panic, because I guess he had prepared for this possibility also. He has like a little scarf that he puts around his face so that he can protect his face. He was really struggling to breathe and see. So he like crouched down into a sheltered area that he found and he waited out the storm, which took 8 hours. so so he's sitting there and I laugh. It's not funny, okay? But I mean, it's just like, that's unbelievable to me. Like, he's sitting there crouched down for 8 hours, just getting blasted by sand. And at first he was saying until he found this sheltered spot, because in my mind, I'm wondering, like, why are you still moving? Like, find a spot and just stay there so you don't get lost. Like, that's my brain. But he explained it perfectly. It makes perfect sense. He said, you have to keep moving because the sand from the sandstorm will bury you if you stay still. So he's just moving in the direction that he thinks the race is going still, like at a, not as fast as he was because he's against the wall of wind and sand and things like that. But he's just going along because he doesn't want to get buried until he finds his little alcove thing. Then he sits in there and he waits it out the rest of the time for the 8 hours. So he ends up spending the night out there. And his initial reaction to the whole thing, he says, was that he was bummed because he was worried that he was going to lose the race. So this dude is incredibly competitive, as you can see. He doesn't realize the danger that he is in yet at all. His mind is still just on the race. Like all of these guys are getting ahead of me, and so he calms himself down a little bit, talks a little logic into his head, and he's like, you know what, it's fine. I'm sure that other people are experiencing the same thing. I'll camp out here for the night and I'll wake up in the morning. I'll find somebody else that also ended up getting caught in this storm and we'll finish the race together. Strong mindset. Well, in the morning, he wakes up and he realizes that the entire landscape has changed. He can't see any of the markers anymore and he doesn't know where he's at, but he still has a feeling that obviously he hasn't drifted that far. Eventually, he's going to find somebody, so he's not stressed. He keeps going for 4 hours. He keeps going, and he still hasn't seen anybody. So he gets to the top of a dune, and he realizes there's nothing. There's no markers. There's no people. He can't see anything, and it starts to dawn on him that he might be in some sort of trouble. So he remembers this thing that his grandfather told him. His grandfather was a military official, and he remembers a story that he told him when he was younger about drinking his urine, right? Like during a time where they ran out of water with their army camp. And so he ends up urinating in his water bottle just as a precautionary. He says he wasn't to the point where he was desperate or anything like that, but he just wanted to plan ahead in case he couldn't find anybody, which was very smart because so urine drinking, if you're ever feeling inclined or in a situation where you have to, the freshest when you're like the most hydrated, it's the best and the cleanest, I guess, to drink. And so he had this in his mind. He had the wherewithal to be like, all right, you know what, I'm gonna do this while I'm still hydrated. That way I have something to drink, right? So should this situation arise, oh my God, that's heavy. Okay. So he had his urine water and he also had like plenty of other supplies. As I mentioned, he had a compass, he had a sleeping bag, he had dehydrated food. So these guys, they were prepared for this race because it's a multi-day thing. So he had supplies with him. The problem was water. So because as I was mentioning, he fills up at the checkpoints. So if you can't find the checkpoint, you can't find your water. But in his mind, he's still thinking, I didn't make it to the checkpoint, so surely the organizers are looking for me and somebody will find me. And he's still thinking he's not that far off, so it's possible he'll find the trail or find a marker or find someone and continue going. But he does start to think in survival mode a bit, right? So while he's not panicking, he's still thinking, okay, like it gets really, really hot. He stops running because in his mind, he's like, what am I running for? I don't know even where I'm running. So he stops running. He starts walking in the days and the evenings. And then during the hottest part of the day in the afternoon, he finds a place to rest and sleep and try to stay cool, right? Because it's really, really hot during the day. So he says he's wearing two hats as well to try to keep his body temperature the same. So he had like a baseball cap and then a ski cap on top of that to try to keep his body temperature even. But on the second day of being lost, he hears a helicopter. And so he's like, oh my gosh, yes, salvation, right? So he said the helicopter was flying so close that he could see the pilot's helmet inside the helicopter. So he was like equipped with a little flare about the size of a pen. He says nowadays that has changed as well. And the runners are required to carry a flare that you would use out at sea that weighs about 500 grams. The runners are a bit bummed about that now because that's a lot of extra weight to carry, but safety first, guys, okay? But he has this little flare and he shoots it up and, the pilot doesn't see it. The pilot just keeps going right by. He starts to get a little disheartened at this point, but not desperate, right? Just kind of disheartened, which I think any of us would be. He's like, okay, what am I going to do now? They didn't see me. I have to find something for the night. Well, he lucks out and he comes across a marabout, which is an Islamic shrine in the middle of the desert. Bedouins use that as shelter as they're crossing the desert. And so it's just like a little added shelter for him from the storms, right? And from the desert and from the heat and everything like that. So he goes in there and he says that the sand inside was so high up from the previous sandstorms that had come through. It just kind of like filled the place up a little bit so that he was able to reach the roof. So he put his Italian flag on the roof of this marabout, hoping that somebody that was looking for him would fly over and see the flag and know that he was in there, right? So, but while he's up there putting his flag up, he sees some bats. And this part, okay, if you're a little bit queasy with things, warning to you, okay? Otherwise, let's trudge forward together. So he sees these bats. He decides he's going to eat these bats and not just eat them, use them for hydration as well. So he's not going to cook them, even though he has the ability to make a fire and things like that. He's got his supplies. But he grabs about 20 bats, he says, grabs like a handful of them. He cuts them open, mashes up their insides, and drinks like the little bat puree that he has made raw. So his purpose of doing this, though, was actually quite clever because the blood is used as hydration, right? So he's hydrating while he's feeding himself with these bats at the same time. And he also decides he's going to cook up a little bit of his dehydrated real food with some fresh urine. He's not using the urine that was in his water bottle yet. He decides to save that for just in case a little bit later, in case he still hasn't found someone or found a way out yet. So he's definitely thinking ahead for the worst case situation or scenario. So this is where things get quite dark, okay? And I will warn people yet again, if you're triggered by certain things regarding like the ending of life, you might want to pause it here or skip over kind of thing. Otherwise, let's trudge forward. So he says that he only gave to despair a couple of times during this situation. One was when the helicopter didn't see him naturally, but he kind of gathered himself and he continued forward. The next part that he gave into despair about was he heard an airplane overhead and he had his flag on the roof and he was like, oh my gosh, the organizers, they're searching for me. This is awesome. So he gets out there and he tries to build a signal fire with everything that he's got. He threw his rucksack in there, everything that he had, trying to signal this airplane, and they flew right over him and didn't see him. And at that point, he starts to really realize, I'm in trouble. I'm alone out here. I don't know where I am. And maybe they're not going to find me. I'm going to die out here, and it's going to be a slow and agonizing death as well. And so he decides to take it upon himself at that point to accelerate the process. That's how he describes it in his own words. He said it wasn't out of sadness or despair or anything like that. It was just a logical thing to do in his mind at the moment, knowing what his end was going to be like, and also the fact that in Italy, if your body is not found, then you're not declared dead for 10 years. So he still had his wife Cinta at home. He had young children. all under the age of 8. And so his mind went to taking care of them. And if you can't be declared dead for 10 years, then his wife would not have an income from his pension for all of this time. However, if he died in the marabout and they found his body, they were able to recover him, then his wife would have an income, his children would be taken care of. So it was a whole logical process he came to in that moment. I'm sure mixed with the emotions and things like that of what he was experiencing out there. But he decides to expedite the end of his life. So he takes his little knife and he cuts his wrists and he waits. However, the next morning, to his dismay, he wakes up. So he realizes that he's so dehydrated that his blood had thickened too much. And when he cut his wrists, he didn't bleed, it just clotted almost instantly. And so he lived through his traumatic event of trying to end things there. And he said that was a huge turning point for him because he realized death didn't want me. That was what he said, end quote there. So he realized right there in the mirabout that he's not supposed to die in the desert, at least not yet, right? He gathers himself, he gets his head back together, he regains his mental fortitude, he says, in that moment, his determination, his will to live, right? And I'm just going to side note here, just because I looked this up because I found that it was so fascinating that it was even possible that you could be so dehydrated that your blood wouldn't drain. The science behind that, or simple science basically, is that the plasma, the watery part of your blood, becomes less. Your overall blood volume becomes less because of how dehydrated you are, but the blood cells themselves are still there. So your blood becomes really, really thick with the blood cells and it doesn't drain anymore. So, learn something new every day. So he gains this new perspective on his own life, on his own situation. He says that death becomes like a friend to him in this moment, and he decides to keep going. So he remembers something that one of the organizers said to everyone before they get started is, if you get lost, look for the clouds on the horizon and go towards that, because that's where you're going to find life. So that's what he decides to start doing. He heads towards those clouds, and along the process, he's killing snakes and lizards and eating them and doing his best to just stay in the moment. He said that the desert became this beautiful place full of life to him, and that it wasn't this place that was trying to kill him anymore. His whole change of perspective is fascinating. He realizes that the desert is full of life if you know where to look. So he's going along and he's just following the clouds. So you might be wondering what was happening on the opposite side of this story with all of the organizers and his family and everything. I mean, he's been gone for like 8 days. So I was definitely wondering, like, where is everybody else? Are they not looking for him? They were. The organizers were looking for him. They had search parties going. His brother and his brother-in-law actually came and flew from Italy to join in the search. Of course, at the time, they all thought that they were looking for remains and not him alive at this point. Like 8 days lost in the Sahara, they didn't have high hopes anymore that he was going to return alive, right? So on the 8th day, he comes across an oasis, and he just sits there and starts to drink. And he says he had to drink really, really slowly because it had been so long. But he sat there for like 6, 7 hours just drinking. And then he gets up a little bit revived and he starts to walk again because he sees some footprints in the sand. And he's like, okay, there's some people around here. So he's kind of like going to explore to see if he can find the people. And he sees a little girl. And this little girl is carrying a basket. And he says that when she looks at him, she's terrified and he can see it on her face, and she just books it. She runs, right? And which I think is perfectly reasonable. Like, she lives in this little nomadic village in the middle of the Sahara. She doesn't know what the heck she's seeing. It's some random guy, and he says that he was so black with the dirt that he probably just looked like some shadow coming up out of the dunes. He's an absolute mess after his situation, covered in bat blood and dirt and sand. So she books it, and she's like, no thanks. But he sees like where she's running towards, so he's like kind of following along. And as he gets closer, he sees some tents and a community, and this community is full of women. All of the men had gone to the market, leaving all of the women there behind. The women, they came out to greet him and figure out what this poor little girl was talking about, of course, and check things out. So they come out, they see him, and they realize that he's in trouble for sure. But because they're women and he's a man, there's no men around, they're not letting him into their tent, which is smart. Never let a strange man into your tent. He says they're really, really kind. They set up a little blanket for him outside in their shady veranda area. They let him rest, they feed him, and they send someone right away to go to the military base, which is close by, to report it to the police that he's just emerged out of the desert like this. He's clearly not doing well. He's lost tons of weight from wandering around and not having any food, water, that kind of thing. And so he's not looking too hot, right? They realize that something is wrong. So they send for help. The military people show up and take him blindfolded back to their base. So the tribe itself like camps close to the base for safety reasons. That's why they were like within distance to be able to go get him help in the first place. The military shows up. They don't know what to think of Mauro. They're like, who is this guy? He's, is he dangerous? What the heck is he doing? Like, it's a really odd thing for somebody to just come up out of the desert, right? He says that he was genuinely worried that they were going to kill him because they all had guns. He's blindfolded the whole time that he's at this military base. They don't speak the same language, so he can't really express who he is himself. He has to wait for them to figure it out. Well, thankfully, before they shoot him, they do find out who he is. They realize that he is the runner that's been lost in the desert, and they take his blindfold off, and they just absolutely celebrate with him. They get so stoked that he's alive, and the proper measures for getting him back to his family, getting him back to a hospital, go underway immediately, right? Getting him the help that he needs. So he gets to the hospital. The military base take him to the nearest hospital so that he can get some help, and he's finally able to call his wife from there. And the first thing he says when she picks up the phone is, "Have you had my funeral yet?" Honestly, the whole situation is not funny, but his mental attitude through it is comical to me. He just seems like somebody that I would want to know. Just such a jovial guy coming up with jokes and stuff after he's been through this like harrowing experience, and he just comes at her with a joke. She's probably wants to wring his neck, But they found out he's alive, he's well. He begins to recover. His liver and his eyes did suffer some damage through this experience, but his kidneys were fine. He wasn't completely damaged from all of it, and drinking the bat blood, eating the lizards and the snakes, and his urine and all of that probably played a part in helping him not get to the point where he died, right? It took about 2 years for him to fully recover. And for the first couple months, he couldn't even eat or drink anything besides liquids, no solids for months. Can you imagine? After that experience, you can't even go have a good meal. But he's grateful to be alive. His family is grateful that he's alive. And it turns out that he actually ended up 181 miles off course. This was the other mind-blowing factor of this for me. He was running this whole time. He ended up in a whole different country. He ended up in Algeria instead of Morocco, where they ended up finally finding him and helping him. So this whole, the whole time his family and the organizers are searching for him, he is way off course. No wonder they were having trouble finding him, And it turns out his brother and brother-in-law actually found the marabout where he was set up, camped for a little while, and they found remnants of him, his shoelaces and things like that. So they were ships in the night, right? But yeah, 181 miles off course. Absolutely nuts. He managed to wander. So after this, he goes to recovery mode for a couple of years, gets himself back to being strong. And 4 years later, he returns to the desert to run this race. And some of us might be like, what? I kind of felt like that. But at the same time, it's pretty incredible to me, that mental fortitude again. It's, he's there just making light of life, right? And I think sometimes that's kind of what you have to do to get through certain things in life. But he came back. He said partly it was because he wanted to finish what he started, which makes perfect sense. He has that competitive spirit, that runner's mindset. He wanted to go back and he wanted to finish it. But the other part of it was that He says he fell in love with the desert through this experience. So while some of us might be like, I'm never looking at another grain of sand again in my whole life, he was like, I want to go back. It calls to me every year. So he comes back every year. He's run about 8 races. At this point, this was like in 2014. This article I found that was him telling his own story. So by 2014, he was running his own races again out in the desert, just enjoying life with much better safety protocols in place after this experience happened with him. It changed the whole way they do these races. So that was a plus to come of it. It's a lot safer for everybody else to go do now. His family is great. His wife and him did end up splitting up, but they remain best friends. And he says, it's better than ever kind of thing. He's got a new love who understands that he is a man on a mission. So, and I think that's a perfect way to describe him, a man on a mission. Because even through the darkest moments of his life, he just kept picking himself up and kept going. He continued doing what he loves. He didn't lose his sense of humor. You can see it in the way he relays his whole experience through this. The desert is a place to love. It's not this horrifying thing. His experience was harrowing in a lot of our opinions and terrifying and whatnot. But he didn't really see it that way. He saw it as a sense of rebirth almost. And he continues to go back to celebrate who he has become now. And celebrate the beauty of it all, the beauty of being alive. And that is pretty cool. Everybody stay safe out there. I will see you next Sunday.